Unlock the secrets, learn new tactics, and build a winning strategy to win the aging game. Welcome to the Aging Game with Bruce and Susan.
Welcome to the Aging Game with Bruce and Susan. It's great to have everybody here. We have a wonderful guest, Dr. Larry Sternberg, and we're going to talk a lot about Parkinson's, and we're going to really get into that. This is Season 2, Episode 9, and welcome to our podcast.
I'm so happy that you're here. You're one of my favorite people that I've met in the last 12 years, and I would love to share something that you have in your hand. So can I tell everybody that you make pens?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So can I see it for a minute? So you make these pens all the way from wood, and then you also are making epoxy ones. They're beautiful. He's made me 2, and they are my absolute favorite. And I love today that yours is green, and it matches your beautiful green outfit.
Thank you very much.
You're very skilled, and you've always been a good friend. I love you and your wife.
Hopefully I can be on the list of getting one of those. And so,
yeah, you should. You are a wonderful host of a podcast he's on, so maybe a nice thank you will be, here's a beautiful pen.
Well, let me just say a few things. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. As you all know, I'm very interested in Parkinson's disease, and I'm very excited to share some of my thoughts to maybe educate some of your audience and to tell you some exciting news about Parkinson's disease as we progress through the program.
Amazing.
Before we start getting into all this, Dr. Sternberg, can you tell us about you and your background? And
Sure. I grew up in, Bruce and I were chatting about this, at the base of the Catskill Mountains in upper New York State. I'm a graduate of the University of Vermont, and I went to medical school in Chicago. My career really was devoted to obstetrics and gynecology. And at the end of my clinical career, I became involved with Medicaid and the Medicare, rather, and the adjudication of Medicare claims, and then retired with my wife to Naples, Florida. I came down here to primarily play golf, and that's what I continue to do. And when I'm not on the golf course, as Susan alluded to, I like to work in the wood shop. I'm a wood turner, and I'm also, more importantly, a board member of the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida.
I see you off all your 10 digits, so you must be very talented.
Yes, I've saved them all.
That's good.
How did you get involved with the Parkinson's Association?
I don't want to tell you about that right now,
Okay.
because I have a secret at the end of our talk.
Oh.
So if we could proceed to the questions that we agreed to
love
talk
it.
All right, way to keep us on track.
That's right.
Then we can move along, and I will explain a little later on to you how I got involved.
Great.
All right. Well, before we get to the questions, I am going to give you my statistics that I have because I want to get your thoughts on them, okay?
Sure.
All right. So I love numbers. I love to look stuff up. And in preparation for this, I learned that roughly 90,000 people are diagnosed with Parkinson's annually in the U.S., and approximately 1 million people are living with Parkinson's in the U.S. currently. I was curious if you thought that was high, accurate, low.
No, actually, those numbers are correct. And I will tell you that a few years ago, when we all went back and looked at those numbers, it became very evident that the numbers which originally were published were wrong, and that the incidence of Parkinson's disease is probably 50% greater than the original numbers. And I did a study with a marketing company a few years ago, and we looked at the incidence of Parkinson's disease in Lee and Collier County. Now, that was a little difficult because we decided to incorporate both seasonal people and full-time residents. And my estimate is that there are probably in the two counties approximately 10,000 individuals that are affected with Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Senior living community. We are the matchmakers of senior housing. Call today at 239-595-0207 for your free consultation.
Welcome back to our podcast.
All right. So before we get to these questions that you're dying to answer, I have a surprise question for you. I promise it's an easy one. Okay. What is something you know today about Parkinson's that you wish you knew sooner?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Sternberg.
Because again, I have some surprises for you.
What?
And my surprises I don't want to give away my surprises. So let's get on to your first question.
All right. We're saving my top secret question.
I love it.
guess.
I love it. So will you tell us some common signs and symptoms of the Parkinson's disease that individuals should consider? And what point should they be seeking a medical attention?
Okay. I'm going to tell you three things. I'm going to repeat them ad nausea for the next hour. The symptoms include tremor. It's a pill rolling tremor, and it is a constant event. It is not something like a intentional tremor where you would move to something and then have a tremor. However, what is now recognized is that approximately 10 to 20% of people with Parkinson's disease do not have a tremor. So it's important to know that because everybody thinks that you have to have a tremor to make this diagnosis, and that's not correct. Another event or symptom that's very prevalent is something called bradykinesia, or very slow movement. So people with Parkinson's disease, if you watch them walk, you'll see that they walk very slowly. And sometimes they have gait freezing. For example, in trying to go through a door, they'll stop and actually freeze before they can make the entry through the doorway. And another symptom is rigidity or stiffness. People with Parkinson's disease are very stiff. And if you know these symptoms, which I just talked about, and you look in a crowd, you can almost identify people who have Parkinson's disease. For example, walking through an airport, now you could probably say, I think that person has Parkinson's disease. The other smaller symptoms that are just as important, but not the three things that I just mentioned, include impaired posture. The patients with Parkinson's disease can't sit upright, and they have imbalance. And they also have some other interesting automatic movements that are disabled. For example, smiling. They have a very flat look. They don't swing their arms when they move. And they don't blink their eyes very much the same way you and I do. And then they have speech changes. They talk very slow. It's very hard to hear them. And they have difficulty writing. Their writing is very small and very scratchy. And last but not least, patients, unfortunately, with Parkinson's disease suffer from depression and anxiety.
That's tough. So,
Yes.
can you explain to us what exactly Parkinson's is and why it's good that we have a good understanding of this condition?
Yes. Parkinson's disease, and I don't want to get too technical in this conversation because um, I want to make it easy for people to understand what I'm talking about and not necessarily it be very technical terms. But there are some technicalities that I have to tell you about. Excuse me. So, Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disease. That's kind of a fancy word, but essentially it means that there's a loss in the brain of some function. And what happens with people with Parkinson's disease is there is an area in the brain, and just because somebody that may have a little bit more knowledge than the general public might be listening, it's called the basal ganglia. And in that area of the brain, there are cells that produce a product called dopamine. And Parkinson's disease is a loss in the brain area of the production of dopamine. And dopamine helps coordinate movement, and that originates in the brain. So, people who have the symptoms that I talked about just before, again, tremor, slow movement, and stiffness, it's a result of the loss of this hormone dopamine in your system. And that defines Parkinson's disease.
Very interesting.
We don't know what causes Parkinson's disease. We don't know why this happens to some people. We think that if you look at areas where there are pockets or density of patients with Parkinson's disease, you see this in, for example, areas where there's heavy manufacturing. And we think it may be a result of the heavy metals that are used in manufacturing. And in Florida, there's a very high density, aside from age, that of Parkinson's disease, and it may be related to pesticides that are used in agriculture.
Interesting.
We know, for example, that when the United States Army used Agent Orange in Vietnam, there's a very high incidence of Parkinson's disease among the military people that were exposed to Agent Orange.
That's
And
interesting.
now,
Mhm.
most importantly, the big deal is that another cause of Parkinson's disease may be related to gene malfunction. That is, patients with Parkinson's disease, some patients, a small number, maybe about 20%, have a gene mutation. And I'll talk a little bit about this later on. And that gene mutation is a result of the development of Parkinson's disease. Or I shouldn't say the result of it, the fact that the individual was born with that gene mutation means that they go on to develop Parkinson's disease. So these other factors that I talk about didn't create the gene mutation. You were born with that gene mutation.
It's wonderful insight
Wow.
for our listeners and very much appreciated. Let's talk about medications and how critical it is for people to take their medications on time and what happens when they don't take their medications on time.
It's critical that they take their medications on time. And this is the biggest challenge that individuals who treat patients with Parkinson's disease have to deal with. Unfortunately, the drugs that are used, that is, the dopamine substitutes, have a half-life, and they don't last all day. And so patients who take these medications have peak and troughs in their well-being. And the big challenge is to be able to dose them accordingly so that there isn't long periods of what we call off time. Off time meaning the half-life of the drug or the life of the drug has depleted, and until they get their next dose and it's built up again, they have to deal with these symptoms. That's a really, really big deal. So here's one of the surprises. The FDA has just in the last 2 weeks approved 2 new drugs for the treatment of Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
And I'm going to tell you the name of them. It doesn't make any difference. One of the drugs is called Vialvi. And this is a really big deal. It's a very small study. So I'm not telling you all who are listening to me that all of a sudden everybody in the world is going to be using this medication. But it is a medication that can be given via a pump using a subcutaneous or under the skin implantation. Excuse me. So we can place a little catheter under the skin and through a pump give people this medication in a more continuous fashion. Now, people who are involved in treating people with diabetes know this very well. That's a really big deal in diabetes. And a lot of people use the pump in diabetes. And now to develop that in Parkinson's disease is something very special. There's a very small study, and we're going to have to, see where it goes in this regard. But think about how exciting this can possibly be in that the implant may be able to identify and make sure that the level is kept constant so that patients now may have very little in the way of off time, which is a really big deal.
Can you repeat the name of that medicine?
I'll spell it for you. It's Vialvey. Now, some other new news is there's another medication. And while this one is not terribly unique, because there is a medication similar to this, but this one may be a little bit better. And the spelling of this one is Crexont. This is a capsule that has inside of it other time-released small granules. So this is kind of cool because some of the granules in there may be for a longer period of time, and some of the granules may be effective for a shorter period of time. So if you start mixing them together and you do it right, and these farmers have put it together correctly, you now have time release. So again, what you're trying to do is to make sure that the off times are very small. And this is a big challenge. It's a big challenge in diabetes, for example, to make sure that individuals, get their insulin in a continuous fashion. And the same thing is applicable in diabetes.
I wanted to
So
make a.
let me just finish my thought for just a second. I'm sorry. So, making sure that you take your medications, if you're not doing this, that you take your medications on time. In today's world, it becomes a little easy because, my entire life, everything I do in my life is run by my phone. And there are a number of apps that you can place on your phone to help you be reminded of when you should take your medication. So with this aid, and I walk around with a smartwatch that, supplements whatever my phone doesn't do. I don't have to do anything. They run my life, and they could also run your medications. So, that's kind of cool. Yeah. Now you got this thing plugged in, and you're all set. You can live your life accordingly.
It's great information.
Yeah, I think meds is really important. I see that in home care a lot, being the focus, especially if you have a patient that goes to the hospital or something of that nature, making sure that they do speak up and they advocate for themselves, that everybody is aware that they do have Parkinson's. These are the meds, and these are the times that they're taking it, because it can have such a huge impact. But you have to advocate for yourself. You can't just assume because you're going to the hospital or ER that they're going to, know that or have that. So I think
that's a very, 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 very important point. And we try to remind people to wear a bracelet, for example, to identify that they have Parkinson's disease, and whoever's with them, again, can help them advocate for being sure that they get their medication. And last but not least, they should have that medication list on their phone, and you'd be able to hand the hospital that list and say, this is what I'm taking, because frequently, if it's a very stressful situation, they may have difficulty in that regard.
Yeah, having a med list at all times is very important. So kind of shifting gears a little, want to talk about what type of support options are here in the community. So support groups, organizations, counseling services, education, what's out there for both people that are living with Parkinson's, but also their loved ones?
First, I have to tell you that numerous studies have demonstrated that support groups help patients with Parkinson's disease. It's unbelievably important that people get a chance to get involved with support groups in terms of being able to help them travel through their disease. And so I'm going to tell you about an exciting thing that I'm personally involved with. The National Institute of Health gave a grant to Rush Medical School in Chicago. And the name of that program is called Persevere. And what we're studying is whether or not a relationship between a mentor and a mentee can change the outcome for both the mentee, who's the caregiver, and a patient. And so there are 100 mentors in the country. I'm one of those mentors, and it's not a special designation. I volunteered to do this, and because I've been a caregiver for more than 2 years, I fell into the right category, and I was accepted in the program, and I'm involved with the program. It's very exciting. It's going to be very interesting to see whether or not this makes if there's any result in this kind of program for patients and for the caregiver, the mentee. But locally, the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida is an organization whose mission is to help people live a better life with Parkinson's disease. And there are numerous support programs that are available through our organization. There are support groups for women who have Parkinson's disease, men who have Parkinson's disease, couples who have Parkinson's disease. And on the website, their calendar of events is very evident. But let me tell you that there are 3 national organizations that play a very large role in helping people and supporting people with Parkinson's disease. One of those national organizations is the Michael J. Fox Foundation, a very wonderful organization. And I'll tell you a little bit more a little later on about some of the things that they've done other than in terms of support, but their research projects are wonderful. And then there's the American Parkinson's Disease Association, another wonderful organization who have lots of very important available information for patients with Parkinson's disease. And last but not least, the Parkinson's Foundation. And all of these organizations have available resources that are really wonderful, and it's pretty easy to access what they have available. For example, the Parkinson's Foundation has a hotline. It's a 1-800 number, and you can call that and ask questions and have your questions answered. We have, for example, at the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida, I'm very proud to tell you about something called a program. It's a 6-week program called Tools for Caregivers. And it's actually a class. And you come to the class for 1 hour a week for 6 weeks. And we have a licensed social worker that teaches that course. And very helpful and something that is locally available.
And adult children can attend those as well?
No, generally speaking, we don't have any children that are attending that.
Okay.
That's an interesting question. I don't know anything about children being involved in helping probably parents with Parkinson's disease, except, at older individuals, older family members for sure, very important. But when you say children, I'm thinking of kids under the age of 13.
No. Like adult children like my age. Like a 40-year-old with a 66-year-old mother.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, adult children.
100%.
So are there any other specific programs and initiatives happening locally for people with Parkinson's, or do we kind of touch on it?
We've touched on it, but let me tell you about some things that are available.
Okay.
There are exercise classes through the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida. I can't say this enough. Exercise. Unbelievably important in patients in dealing with Parkinson's disease. And recently, I have gotten involved with knowing that there's some kind of fun things besides going into the gym and working out. Like, one of the things that's extremely helpful for people with Parkinson's disease is boxing.
Right.
So, getting involved in a boxing class, and I think the Hit Factory here in the gallery has boxing classes for people with Parkinson's disease. And another really kind of fun activity is ping pong. Ping pong has been shown to be very helpful with people with Parkinson's disease. That's kind of cool. You walk into this, in Fort Myers, they have a program that's open to anybody. And there's a very wealthy benefactor who initiated this program. It's got a world champion ping pong player, and it teaches ping pong. And you walk in there and you see all these people with Parkinson's disease playing ping pong. So
that's great.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, Florida Hit Factory has that Parkinson's boxing, which I'm drawing a complete blank on it.
Well, I remember last year you had Sugar Ray.
We had him come for the Parkinson's fundraiser.
So anyway, you're talking about programs that are available for people with Parkinson's disease, and so I'm
rock steady.
So I'm going to tell you about a program that I'm very proud of, and that is available. I come from a medical community that was involved with a university. So having educational programs in a university setting is an everyday event, not unusual. But the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida has sponsored an educational symposium once a year. I happen to be the chair of that symposium. And I can tell you, this year, the symposium, by the way, is going to be April 24th. And I can tell you that this program over the years has been unbelievably popular. And I think this year is going to be even better. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program because I'm so excited about it. And again, this is unusual because we have a program in a non-university setting, in the middle of nowhere. And we're going to have, when I tell you who we're going to have, it's like unbelievable that we could put this together. We're going to have the mission director from the American Parkinson's Disease Association. Her name is Dr. Rebecca Gilbert, and she's going to be talking about intimacy and sex in Parkinson's disease. And because my background is in obstetrics and gynecology, I'm really excited about this. I have looked for years to find a speaker that can talk about this subject matter, and that's going to be very exciting for this community. They won a national award for their presentation of a program called Park and Sex. And so I've heard her speak before, and I can't wait to have her here in this community. In addition, we have the director of movement disorder and neurorestoration, the chairman of the department from the University of Florida in Gainesville, who's coming, and he's going to be speaking about new therapies and best practices in Parkinson's disease. Again, very excited to have the opportunity to have him. And last but not least, we're going to have the chair of the Department of Movement Disorder at the University of Florida, who's going to be talking about, and something I'm going to talk about a little later on, deep brain stimulation. And we have a local neurosurgeon who's going to be on that panel also. So again, educational opportunities.
How long have you been a part of the symposiums? You've been
a couple of years.
Yeah, they're always fantastic.
I can't tell you. I'm just busting with excitement.
Congratulations, because that's wonderful. And
I don't want anyone to think though. Like I think some people hear education and might think like it's boring, because there are we have a wide range of people that are listening to this. I think the thing to remember is it is extremely educational. There's a wonderful community of people, networking opportunities, meet people that are on this journey at the same place that you are. I've always found them very rewarding. I've learned something every year that was surprising and something that I could take back and apply in my life personally, where I'm dealing with Parkinson's in family as well as professionally. And I would encourage anyone, whether you're a professional, whether you're a loved one, anyone should be considering coming to that educational symposium.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're going to do, because I've been to many national programs, and when you get a whole bunch of physicians together, it gets to be very technical. But our speakers, I've chatted with them, and we're going to put it at a level where people will not be bored because it's so technical that they don't understand what's going on. They will understand clearly from these presentations. So I'm pretty excited about this program this year.
Well, congratulations. If people wanted to get more information on that symposium, would they just contact the Parkinson's Association?
the website, the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida. It's SW Florida. It's the Parkinson's Association of SWFL.org. They will be able to see the registration for that program and get involved. I should take some time out to say something. The Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida is a nonprofit organization, and it doesn't cost you anything to belong to this organization. All it costs you is 2 minutes of time to go to the website and register that you'd like to become a member.
Yeah. They have wonderful events too. I think Bags and Bingo is my personal favorite event that they have. I love the walk every year, the fundraiser each spring. I mean, there's been wonderful speakers. I don't know who they have set up this upcoming year, but you mentioned last year we had Sugar Ray Leonard. If I recall right, I think you got a nice picture towering over him, you and your 6-foot+ self. So that was super fun. Like, I think they have wonderful events in the community that really bring people together. So it is a great organization.
Yeah, I also want to make another comment because I'm prejudiced about the symposium, but this is not a fundraiser. It's an educational program. It costs us a few bucks to put the program on, and there's a small tuition involved in attending the program. But I want to emphasize that this is not a fundraiser, and we're not making any money, and we're using any money that we have and that they'll let me use to enhance the program.
So I want to back up just a smidge. So you had mentioned ping pong. We talked about boxing. We know that there's the Rock Steady program. Those are kind of all over at various gyms, clubs, different things of that. But what type of lifestyle modifications or activities can help them manage their symptoms or improve their quality of life? Number 6.
Exercise. Extremely important. And then, I'm going to say this, but this is probably applicable to any disease. I mean, you have to have a reasonable diet. Sleep hygiene is extremely important. People with Parkinson's disease fatigue easily, and their symptoms get worse when they're fatigued. So trying to pay attention to sleep hygiene, and I won't go into the details of, what you have to do, but, good sleep habits are published all over the place. You're not watching scary movies before you go to bed or fighting with your spouse, and then
no scary movies. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, you don't have Parkinson's disease, so you're all right.
Yeah, hopefully. Yikes.
It's interesting because I think about, it's wonderful that people have spouses and caregivers, but I think about people who are alone.
Oh, I'm going to talk about that right now.
Okay.
Social engagement in Parkinson's disease is extremely important. We know that people who are early diagnosed with Parkinson's disease hide in the closet. They don't come out. They don't want people to know that they have the disease. They're ashamed of themselves of having this disease. So social involvement is extremely important. And for example, we recognize that at the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida, and we have a monthly lunch brunch where a group of people with Parkinson's disease go and have lunch at a given restaurant and get a chance to socialize. It's extremely important that people who are taking care of these patients, loved ones, help them have social engagement. That's unbelievably important.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the challenges that people with Parkinson's face and what they can do to overcome and cope with those challenges?
Yeah, I talked about the motor symptoms. Again, tremor, rigidity, slowness, sleep disorders, cognitive changes in people who advance in the disease, depression, and isolation are all of the challenges that patients with Parkinson's disease have to deal with. Coping with the strategies, the first and primary issue in that regard is careful management of your medication. And so we talked about some of those new things that are happening. And, those individuals that are part of the caregiver program for those patients need to help them make sure that they manage their medications as best as they can. So if the Parkinson's patient, for example, is not using their cell phone app, the caregiver can use the cell phone app to help them, make sure that their medications are appropriately giving. I was telling you about the program that I'm involved with Persevere, and I have a weekly conversation with my mentee, and I was talking to him yesterday, and he said his phone went off, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Oh, I got to go give my wife her medication." So, that's
Got to use technology to your advantage.
yeah. And again, physical activity, mental health, help. There's individual counseling. Those kinds of programs are extremely helpful in helping people with that challenge.
So I know you've mentioned a couple medications that are coming out. Are there any other treatments or therapies that are showing promising results in managing this?
This was an exciting thing and one of the questions I was really excited to talk to you about. Number one on the list, not necessarily in the order of priority, but on the list is stem cell therapy. I don't want to go into the details about what stem cell therapy is because it's very, very complicated. And you all may know, for example, about the huge advance that was made in sickle cell disease via stem cell therapy, curing this disease as a result of successful stem cell therapy. But that is now a strategy that's being looked at in Parkinson's disease. So in general terms, what happens is you can maybe place the stem cell in the brain and get new cells to develop that would be producing the appropriate amounts of dopamine. And wouldn't that be exciting? Is that something I need to know about?
Yeah, I'm just telling you.
What's that?
17 minutes left, 3 questions to go in closing remarks. 17.
Oh, I'll talk fast.
We're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're very good.
So
let me finish.
Okay.
This is my most exciting question.
Okay.
Non-invasive techniques that we have now. Something called, y'all are familiar with the term ultrasound. Now they've developed something called focused ultrasound, where we can identify the area in the brain that needs to be helped and shoot the beam in and ablate the area. That's kind of cool. Very cool. And now the big thing, the big exciting news. And this was a result of research, actually, from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And that is talking about a substance called, and I'm going to give you the name of the substance. It's a little technical. I may have to come up with a little acronym for this thing, but it's called alpha-synuclein. Let's just call it Alfie.
Alfie.
And what's happened and been identified in people with Parkinson's disease and that is that there's an accumulation, an aggregation of alpha in the brain. So what happens is alpha unfolds in the brain and starts recruiting some of his buddies that have normal configuration, and they aggregate. And as a result of this accumulation, that may be part of the dysfunction in Parkinson's disease. Now, why is this important? This is a really big deal. Because we know, for example, that before the onset of symptoms, in some patients with Parkinson's disease, there's a loss of smell. So if you start looking at patients who have a loss of smell and an accumulation of alpha-synuclein, you may be able to identify early on, before the onset of symptoms, a patient who probably going to go on to develop Parkinson's disease. That's a really big deal. Well, why is that a big deal? Because if we develop some drugs that are able to decrease the aggregation of alpha, then we might be able to be on the road, big deal on the road to helping people with Parkinson's disease.
At least slow down the progression.
Absolutely. And maybe prevent the onset of these really terrible symptoms. So that's important. We know, for example, that the new drugs to treat diabetes may help people with Parkinson's disease. It's complicated, but those drugs may decrease an immune response in the brain and help people with Parkinson's disease. And I also told you that patients who have Parkinson's disease have a gene mutation. And these genes start making products that aren't very helpful with people with Parkinson's disease. And so we're developing now drugs to go ahead and treat people that have the gene mutation to stop some of the bad activities that's being created by these genes. And another big, important strategy in treatment is called deep brain stimulation. And that's a process by which electrodes can be placed in the brain and interrupt these abnormal neurologic events that are taking place and help people decrease, for example, their symptom of tremor. That's a really big deal. And something also called dyskinesia, which is Michael J. Fox, if you watch him, has dyskinesia. He has these abnormal hand movements. And so deep brain stimulation, which has been around now for a while, is extremely helpful. But here's the exciting news. Now using artificial intelligence, we have adaptive DBS. So all of a sudden now, we can have the electrodes in place, and if the electrodes begin to detect some increased abnormal activity, they may be able to, the generator may be able to produce a little bit more pulsation and therefore decrease the symptoms. That's a really, really interesting phenomena and something that's pretty exciting. Before we go any further, there's one last question. I'm going to finish with this, but I want to make sure I have time to discuss the last question.
You have time, but let's stay on this one that it stays in order for while we're doing this.
Okay.
We can make edits, but we have 10 minutes, and I have 2 questions I really want to ask.
Well, I want 2 minutes for.
Okay, we've got 12 to go.
All right.
So what is this?
All right.
10:47 edit.
I'm doing all right then, huh?
You're doing great.
Okay, so we have some new we have this biomarker, this alpha-synuclein. Nobody in the world, by the way, is going to call it alpha. So,
I liked it.
I liked it. Yeah.
So
You never know.
For your audience, forgive me, but I wanted to make it, easy for everybody to understand. So a little bit about diagnostic techniques that are available. There's something called a DAT scan. It's a scan by which you can place a radioactive material in the bloodstream and then take an MRI picture. And patients with Parkinson's disease have, if you put the right particular radioactive material in, you can demonstrate that it doesn't accumulate the way it does normally in patients. And by looking at those films, you can help relative to making the diagnosis. So very exciting. I told you a little bit about alpha, but now it gets even more exciting because determining the level of alpha-synuclein, abnormal alpha-synuclein in the body, the only way that could be determined is via a spinal tap. So you don't going to go around doing a spinal tap on a whole bunch of people that you don't have to do it on. So now what's been developed is a skin biopsy that can be done in the neck and in the ankle. And stained correctly, you can identify abnormal alpha. And that's a big deal because, neurologists can do this in their office, send it off to the lab, and, be very helpful in terms of the diagnosis.
Is that done locally?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So a local neurologist could do that. And not I don't think the final stain and determination is done locally. I don't know what labs do it here. I didn't look at that, but the labs are available in the country to do that. Why is that important? Because there are some other diseases, which I'm not going to necessarily go into in detail, mimic Parkinson's disease. But if you don't have the right diagnosis, those patients are not going to respond to dopamine. So it's kind of important to have that diagnosis correct so that you're treating the patient and not saying, well, the patient's not responding, so we're going to give him more and more medication. That's not going to work. So it's a little bit difficult, but it's important to be able to make a more definitive diagnosis. And so being able to develop tests, and hopefully there will be a blood test soon that will be able to identify alpha-synuclein.
Great information. I know you have some.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about family members and caregivers. They play such a vital role in the care of any senior. And since we're specifically talking about Parkinson's, what resources are here to help, whether that's a family caregiver or a professional caregiver, to help them in working with someone living with Parkinson's?
Again, the national organizations are great. And I wouldn't discount, considering those organizations. The Parkinson's Association, as I mentioned, has, innumerable support groups. The Veterans Administration has support groups. Anybody who can use a web, search the web, can find, a number of resources in terms of being able to get help. For example, there's a wonderful, absolutely fabulous program at the JCC in Tampa, Florida. I actually just attended a symposium there, and they have a wonderful, wonderful program available to people. And I'm thinking only of Naples, but if you extend out, they have wonderful programs.
I think something really important to mention, maybe you can talk about this a little from the senior housing aspect, but I think resources are really important. I love that you have so many things that people can look at online. I think so many of our listeners are local, but also in other areas where they're not. But there are local options as well. I know at Bright Star, so we are a Struthers certified home care agency, which means that we are certified for Parkinson's care. So all of our caregivers go through a specific training and they go through it annually, because caring for someone living with Parkinson's is so different than just your average senior or other things. I know Struthers was recently bought out, and now they fall under the Parkinson's Foundation. But it is a wonderful training. It's very comprehensive. We offer it to all of our caregivers, nurses, but we do also offer it to family members. It's something they can do at a self-paced online, or I do have trained coaches in our office. And I know that there are communities in Naples that specialize in that well.
There are.
And it's important because living and working with someone with Parkinson's is so different.
It's true. There are definitely some senior communities that specialize in providing care for people with Parkinson's, for sure.
Definitely things to consider as you're on the journey.
Dr. Sternberg, I know we're kind of moving through this rather quickly. Do you have any closing remarks that you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, two things. One of the questions that you posed was, can you share an inspiring story about someone who has Parkinson's disease? And I want to tell you the story. I know a woman who, a long time ago, decided that she wanted to study medicine. And so before she went to medical school, this woman went to Africa, worked for the public health organization, and was very active in treating, not with Parkinson's disease, but treating patients in Africa. She was very active, very athletic woman. She climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And when she came back from Africa, she decided that medicine is what she wanted to do, and she went to medical school. And she ended up in a specialty of obstetrics and gynecology. And was a very, very renowned individual in the community practicing obstetrics and gynecology. And I happen to know from the community that she was a beloved member of the community, especially the medical community, in that regard. But about 15 years ago, she started to notice that she was having trouble with some concentration issues, and also her fine motor skills were getting worse, and she recognized that she couldn't operate anymore. So she stopped operating and devoted her practice to gynecology and was extremely successful. They were, it was difficult to get an appointment with her because she was so beloved. And then her symptoms got worse, and she needed to retire. So she left that practice and retired to the Naples area, actually, to continue on with her life, and got progressively worse. So that she became very dependent on activities of daily living. But, previously she had been very athletic in sports, running, biking, fly fishing, playing golf. She's a pretty cool lady.
I think so. I think she's very cool.
And unfortunately, just got a little bit worse. But she said, I'm not giving up. So she turned to something that she was born with, and the ability to create art, and went to the art studio and started painting very successfully. And then she went to exercise classes She went to speech therapy. She went to yoga classes. She had to end up doing chair yoga, but she did chair yoga. And on her list of things to do in life, she decided to tandem parachute out of an airplane. So she jumped from 18,000 feet in tandem out of an airplane. And then she decided, well, that's not enough. I'm going to go hand kite gliding. And she did that. And she went to drum classes, boxing classes, and support groups. She won an award recently. She won the quarterly award for the spirit of wellness, given by her retirement community. And 40 years ago, that woman chose me to be her husband.
Wow.
And so I've had the opportunity to go through this with her and love her while she deals with her disease.
You know, the story about your wife, and, you know, I actually have note cards that she created, and I have them on my desk. I don't want to use them. So they're so beautiful. They're so nice. And so you guys, for what you do with Parkinson's and your support, bless your heart. So
Can I tell the story about the cards?
Sure.
So I was the chair for the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida's fundraiser last year. And I had met Dr. Sternberg and his wife about a year or two before that, and had shared her story at the fundraiser the year before, and had the opportunity to visit them at the community where they live, and they were doing an art show, and her art was on the wall, and it was remarkable. She painted herself skydiving. There were many, and I was very inspired by them. My grandfather had Parkinson's and passed away in 2001, and he was very into art as well. So it was very touching to me to get to see her and have that ability. When I was the chair, I wanted to give a gift to the people that had given their time and their support and the funds to the luncheon. So I asked her if I could turn her card or her art into note cards as a thank you for people. And I was blessed enough that she said yes. She eagerly sent me her favorites right away. And that was such a fun project for me to work on. There's a little card in there that talks briefly about her story, and then a little note from her as the artist. And I too have a couple of those left. And I think all the time that I want to use them. I want to write something to someone very special and give that. But I feel like I just can't do it. I want to save them forever. And then that day that we were telling her story and filming, you had given me a tour of the community, and we went to the art center where she is so often, and there was all these paintings around the wall, and there was a painting of a raccoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. I love raccoons. I start telling him how I want a raccoon, the whole 9 yards. And about a month later, this painting shows up at my office with a letter from her saying, I heard that you loved Rocky. I want you to have it. And so now it hangs proudly in my office, and every day I get to start and end my day looking at that. And I feel like it's a wonderful connection, not only to her, but a reminder to my grandfather. All the things that we talked about today are wonderful. There's a great community for this, and it didn't exist when my grandfather had Parkinson's. He was a doctor too. Maybe doctors and Parkinson's and art go together. My grandmother was a nurse. She took wonderful care of him, but the support for her wasn't there. These types of things for him weren't there. And I think that while he had a wonderful and blessed and rich life, it could have been so much better dealing with this disease. And that's why I encourage people to not, as you mentioned, hide in the closet, to talk about it, to not be embarrassed. There's a community of us out there that love you, want to support you, want to tell your story. And there's something to be said about the community. And I think down here in Southwest Florida, it's better than any other part of the United States.
Thank you very much for coming today. You
Yeah.
provided wonderful information, and I think our listeners, I think you provided it in a way that people could understand it, not too technical, and you just wonderful, wonderful stories, wonderful insight. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do it.
So,
I couldn't imagine having anyone else here. I love you. I love your wife, and you're a very dear friend that I will take with forever.
Thank you very much.
At V-Image Productions, we know that every story has its own rhythm, a unique look, and moments worth capturing. From photography that freezes time to cinematography that brings those moments to life, we don't just shoot, we create. Our passion for storytelling and attention to detail mean that each project, big or small, gets the same dedication, the same creativity, and the same V-Image touch. Whether it's a corporate event, social media content, or a promotional campaign, we're here to help you tell your story your way. V-Image Productions. Your image is our focus. Call today for more information at 239-287-5577.
So our next episode, which is going to be very exciting, it's season 2, episode 10, which is going to be our last one for season 2. We're going to just open it up for questions. We received a lot of questions from our listeners, and it's just going to be filled with questions and answers. And so we're not really sure where this is going to go. It might go different ways, but it's just, we get all these different questions from our listeners, and we're just going to open it up for that.
Yeah, we're going to have a special guest join us to go over all those questions with us and have some fun with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're good. Good
All
job.
right. We
So
doing
I was
okay?
stopping you on the political thing because this will air after the election.
.com.